What is going on, everybody? I apologize ahead of time if I talk fast. I'm trying to keep this video length to a minimum. E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, D4, E captures D4, knight captures D4, knight to F6, the beginning of the Schmid Variation. White will continue development with knight to C3, and black captures the loose pawn. Even though it's there for the taking by the knight on C3, this is called the Schmid Gambit. And there's two things you can do here. No other option. You can either capture the knight on E4 or the knight on C6. The sideline is knight on C6. Only a handful of masters have played this in a rated match. And black's only reply is to Copycat. And I like to call it the Copycat variation. So after the knight copies the first move, you got to go ahead and take on the queen. Black's got no option other than to continue copycatting. You go ahead and take on the F7 pawn, and black, if they continue to copycat, would be a mistake. And I'll show you why. After the knight captures the rook and the knight captures the rook, more or less what's going to happen, you can get your knight out, but they will not be able to get their knight out. If they want to give up all the pawns on the king side, they can technically get away with snapping it. You must play bishop e3 to prevent the knight from escaping, because the king may not always be able to protect it if they get attacked. That being said, your next move is going to want to be bringing your bishop to c4 so your knight can get out on the f7 square that's covered. So like if they try to fianchetto their bishop or something, you bring your knight here or your bishop there, they'll be able to get out. If they prevent that by pushing d5, there's a second way of doing that, and that is bringing your bishop to d3, attacking the h7 pawn. And if they did something like this, you would be able to capture the pawn, and now the knight can get out on the g6 square. If they really get on tilt and they want to stop that, they can push the g pawn to g6. If that's the case, go ahead and capture it with the knight. When they recapture with the pawn, you can recapture it with the bishop with check. Regardless of what square they go to, you just want to castle queenside, and you can pick up that knight on your own time. It's not going nowhere. So that is why they can't continue to copy, and their best move is to actually scoop up your knight right away so they don't lose the rook as well. And your best move is not to capture the knight right away. There's no rush. Bring your bishop to c4. That puts the king in check, and they got 4 moves. If they go anywhere on the e file, you just want to go ahead and castle, and then you can scoop up the knight when you so choose. Even the g6 pawn, same thing. The computer will tell you to check first, but it'll literally turn into a threefold repetition, so just do the check first. And last but not least, if it goes to f6, you want to push the h pawn. And that is because if black tries playing a move like bishop c5, trying to make it safe for the knight to get out of dodge on the f2 square, you can go ahead and play bishop g5, checking the black king. And if it marches forward, it's going to be game over real fast. And if it goes to the safe square, g6, you can pick up the knight with your rook, and you're going to have an excellent game. According to the computer, it's even, but the king is not safe, and your development is not too shabby right about now. That is the line that I call the copycat variation. The only other line is capturing the knight on e4, and then the queen will come to e7, pinning that knight against the king. Play will continue, pushing the f pawn to f3, defending the knight. Black will push d5, attacking the knight, and it forks here in 2 different ways. If you capture the knight on c6, they'll recapture, and then your queen has to go to a square where it can recapture for the knight. So e2, d3, and d4 all work, because when the pawn captures the knight, you want to recapture with the queen. And since they're facing off and both pinned to their own kings, the black queen will capture the white queen, and the white pawn will recapture. I'm not going to go any farther from here because it's all tactics. There's a million different ways this can fork off and stay even. The second option, if you don't take the knight right away, is bringing the bishop out and attacking it as well and pinning it to the king. Black must unpin it, and you got two options. They're both going to diverge and then meet back. You can either castle or attack the knight. Black wants to recapture with the pawn, because if it recaptures with the bishop, it'll interfere with castling queenside. Because after the bishop is recaptured, white castles, and since the knight is no longer pinned, black has to capture the knight now. And the rook will slide over to e1 and pin the pawn against the queen. And this is when black castles queenside. If we rewind and capture with the bishop, the knight will capture the bishop, and now the pawn will recapture the knight. When white castles kingside and the knight falls, when the rook moves over to e1, the king can no longer castle queenside because the queen on the white end slices down the d-file and doesn't allow it. So if we rewind, I'll show you how those two moves, capturing and castling, both meet up in the same position. They transpose. If you attack, the pawn will recapture, you'll castle, the knight will fall, and the rook will move over. This position is the same even if you castle first, the knight falls, you take the knight, they recapture, and then the rook moves over. Same exact position. So from here, the king will castle, the rook will take the pawn, and the best square for the queen is b4, but it can also do f6. White's queen is best placed on e2, and that's when the pawn will come to c5, attacking the knight. The knight will backtrack to b3, and that's when black tries to set up a tactic with queen to b6. They can push the pawn, that'll attack the knight, and it's a discovery check against the king. So white will foil that attack by getting their bishop involved and putting it on e3. That's when black will bring out their bishop as well on d6, and I'm going to cut the line off right there because all pieces are developed. We've been in the middle game for a little bit, but officially the only piece that hasn't moved are one rook each. That's good enough for me. I am going to mention one other alternative just because more than one master has tried this line. It's bringing the bishop out to c5, attacking the knight, and the same move is played. Just bishop to e3, protecting, getting rid of the pin. And that's that. That normally would wrap up the video, but I'm going to suggest a novelty move to y'all, so y'all can have a good day now. Instead of bringing out the pawn to f3 to cover the knight, take a peek at bishop to d3. Looks very weird, and it is a weird line, believe me. The knight is now protected, even though it's still pinned. You leave your other knight that's on d4 totally up for the grabs. And if black captures that, it'll allow you time to castle. And now you can move your other knight from being pinned. I'll let you venture down this line all by yourselves. Look at all the options. I will mention that one of the more weird moves is when black pushes d5. Bishop to c4 is actually the top engine move. Yeah, throwing yourself under the fire. But I appreciate you guys, and I will see you on the next video. I think we're probably going to do the Steins next if I don't go back and do one of the sidelines. Thank you.